Welcome back to another edition of ESBR Boxing. I'm Thomas, joined by my colleague Danny, and today we'll be discussing the IBF Super Featherweight title defense of Anthony Cacace, who will be defending against Josh Warrington September 21st at Wembley Stadium on the undercard of Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. So, as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, interact with our content any way you can. That would be greatly appreciated. Uh, so Anthony Cacace kind of burst onto the world scene earlier this year when he stopped Joe Cordina. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this. Did you Were you familiar with Cacace beforehand? How familiar were you with him? And was his win a shock to you?
Well, I was familiar with Anthony Cacace. He's from the same part of Ireland as me. And funny enough, my stepdad actually is one of his sponsors. So if you look at his shorts on the 90 foot Joe Cordina, you'll see Limavady Roller Doors, which is my stepdad's company. So big plug for Limavady Roller Doors. And I was familiar with him from a boxing perspective as well. I was at his fight against Michael Magnesi. Believe that was in Manchester. I want to say on the undercard of Joe Joyce, Joseph Parker. So I was familiar with him. Did I, truthfully, if you'd have told me 2 years ago that he would be a world champion, beating the likes of Joe Cordina, I'm not so sure. I feel like Cacace is a fighter who in around Ireland, around Northern Ireland, has always been very highly regarded in boxing circles. Carl Frampton's always spoke very highly of him, sparred many rounds with him. But he felt like a fighter whose best years were maybe slipping by him without him getting the fights. I mean, he's 35 now, which, at super featherweight, you're coming towards the end a lot of times. But the Cordina win, which I'm sure we'll come into in more detail, as you say, Thomas, was a massive win for him, a life changing, career changing win. But I was familiar with Anto being a local lad for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, 22 wins, only 8 stoppage wins, but so you look at that record and you don't think that he's a puncher, but in that Joe Cordina fight, he looked like a puncher. So it's definitely, when you're going up against Anthony Cacace, you definitely want to be mindful of the power and don't want to take that record, um, at face value. But he's going up against Josh Warrington, um, quite a significant underdog here. I mean, he lost his last 2 fights. He is a named former world champion, of course. Do you do you see him posing any kind of trouble or having any kind of success here? And if he were to, what would be the path to victory for him?
I don't think anyone's going to have a comfortable night against Josh Warrington, just stylistically how he fights. And I think the path to victory for him is virtually the same in every one of his fights, is just to close that distance and make it an inside fight. Essentially, I think that's where Josh Warrington does his best work. It's where he can utilize some of the dark art, so to speak, which people have been critical of him for. So that's his route to victory. I do see him having success in the fight. I think where he might come unstuck is what might be meeting him when he attempts to close that distance. I think Josh Warrington, despite being the younger fighter, I don't think he's the fresher fighter here. He's had a lot of wars. He's been fighting at a high level for a long time. He suffered a bad knockout against Mauricio Lara. The Lee Wood fight, I thought personally, he was slightly unfortunate just with in a fight of that magnitude. I thought he maybe should have been given that minute at the end of the round, but that was again a stoppage loss. So I just wonder whether at this stage of his career, the route he's going to have to go down to get where he needs to get to fight his fight is going to be a difficult one for him, I think.
Yeah, he's definitely up against the odds here, but perhaps he could upset Kakachi the same way Kakachi upset Cordina earlier this year. It's
Of
just
course.
boxing, the theater of the unexpected, of course. But I wanted to get your thoughts, without giving away your prediction too much or who you think for sure is going to win. where do you think the winner fits into the general overall landscape at 130 pounds? And what do you think would be next for them, or what do you want to see next?
Well, we were discussing this in a video the other day, and I think 130 isn't the most star-studded division. If you look at the other world champions at the weight, if you look at unifications, you got Lamont Roach, you got Robson Cacace, and I think Navarrete still has the other iteration of the title. So Navarrete is probably the biggest commercial fight. Domestically, I think especially if Josh Warrington wins, that Lee Wood rematch is a huge fight if it's for a world title and a different weight for both of them. I think Lee Wood potentially is probably even the biggest fight for Anthony Cacace if he was to be victorious. But the thing is with these Riyadh season shows, I think those unifications, which aren't the biggest commercially, they'll still be fighters will still be compensated as if they were a big commercial fight. So I think that, especially if Cacace wins, that's potentially what you're more likely to see. Because I think if Warrington is to pull off the upset, I think that Lee Wood rematch, which is a big fight regardless, would be a massive fight for sure for another world title at 130.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we'll have to see what happens, of course. You you don't think it's out of the question that Josh Warrington has some success in this fight. As you mentioned, no one has an easy night against him, but give us your prediction here. How do you see it going? Do you think that he can pull it off? Or do you think that Anthony Cacace will win?
With respect, I really like Josh Warrington. He's one of the nicest guys I've met in boxing. So this isn't from any place of ill will towards him or bias towards Cacace because he's from Ireland as well. But I think it's maybe just running into a fighter who's not the best stylistic matchup for what Josh Warrington, and after maybe one war too many. And I actually fancy Anthony Cacace to win the fight by stoppage somewhere in the first 7, 8 rounds, to be honest. I just think I can see him completely dominating the fight at long range and at mid range. I think that's where it could get a bit ugly for Josh Warrington. He's never been a fighter with the best defense, and Cacace's, as well as carrying power, as we saw against Cordina, he also showed he's got great shot selection. You don't just beat Joe Cordina, an Olympic medalist, a former two-time world champion with just raw punch power. You have to find the shots, and he was able to do that against Joe Cordina, who, for my money, has a significantly better defense than Josh Warrington. Chin, you could argue Josh Warrington's a tough fighter, but I just think it's maybe one too many at this stage for Josh Warrington, so I'm picking Cacace by KO.
Yeah, man, honestly, it would be hard to argue against that. Yeah, Cacace, as you mentioned, slightly older, 35 to I believe 33 for Warrington, but yeah, the mileage really is what tells the whole story. And Warrington, he definitely has the mileage, whereas Cacace, a lot more fresh, really is just starting to enter the world level. He hasn't really taken that punishment at the world level that Warrington has. So yeah, hard to pick against him here. I would have to I'll say TKO for Cacace, round 5 or 6, somewhere in the middle of the fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does it for our Cacace Warrington preview. Let us know what you guys think. Comment, like, subscribe, of course, but comment under. Let us know your prediction, and especially if you think that Warrington is going to pull off the upset. Make sure to give a shout in the comment section below. But yeah, anyway, thank you for joining, Danny, and yeah, September 21st, stat card. Looking forward to it. So yeah, see you next time.
Here's Thomas, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.